Welcome to Breakthrough with MediaU, where we are here for you to break ahead, break through, break in, break forward with everything you want to do. In these 22-minute accelerated mentoring sessions, you will get expert advice from people who are actually doing it right now. And today we have an extraordinary guest, Fernando Ferro, a filmmaker from Caracas, Venezuela, who is a director, a producer, a writer, a television star, a person whom I am so happy to call a friend, a partner in MediaU Media, which is designed to produce and create content that is diverse, genuine, and authentic for the general market. Fernando, hello. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, what a sweet intro. Aw,
Well, you're
that
a
was
sweet
so
guy.
nice. That was so nice. You're gonna follow me around. I'm just gonna have you next to me anytime I meet anybody. So
Sounds,
sweet.
sounds perfect. I think it's always easier in the entertainment industry if you double team.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I'm so happy to be here. I'm very happy to be here.
Hey, Fernando, for filmmakers who are coming up and emerging, maybe even mid career, and finding ways to energize and re energize themselves, let's look at three great mentoring tips for them. And maybe you could start by just talking about exploring and curiosity and why that's important.
I mean, for me, that's not just important, that's everything. I mean, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, and when I mean by that, I just don't mean in the position of director or writer, producer, but in any in the kind of the full world of filmmaking, the you need to be curious. You need to explore. You need to get out of your comfort zone to learn. I think we're in a time now where our industry is evolving so quickly and so many elements of our industry are changing, which is making it more accessible for anyone to come out and make a film. But to be in that position to actually do it, you have to get yourself out of your comfort zone to learn. You have to put yourself out of what you know and be open to what you don't and take that in and incorporate that into your life as a professional and as a storyteller. So I think to be curious for me has been my guiding principle in anything that I do. It's taken me in on roads that have led me to where I am today. And I don't think if I was curious, I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be talking to me for sure. Um,
Do you think that
it's
you
the
were?
fundamental thing.
Do you think you were born curious, or you've developed the curiosity muscle so you could be good in this business?
I think I think everyone has a level of curiosity born within them, but I do consider that to be a muscle. And I think for me, it was watching movies that opened up other worlds to me. And what was fascinating about, like, I have a distinct memory of watching like Raiders of the Lost Ark. And as fascinated as I was by the story itself, I was more fascinated on how they did it. How did they make this happen? And obviously that was something that I naturally had, but then it became actually identifying how they actually did it. So buying books that weren't necessarily on any requirement reading lists in school or even in film school, taking myself out of just what was given to me and take and observing more knowledge or asking more questions or trying to meet people that definitely knew more than I did and not be afraid to ask. I think that that is a muscle. I don't think that's a natural thing. I think you just have to identify that, in particular with our industry, we're always venturing into the unknown because every project you do presents its new challenges, presents the things that are unseen or the things out of your control, and the only way to mitigate that is to learn as much as you can, and that requires a curiosity. I think the minute that you stop doing that, I think that that's when there's a problem that you have to address.
You know, that really makes me think about people who have had long careers in our industry
Mhm,
are the curious people. You think about directors who've been doing it for decades: Spielberg,
mhm,
Scorsese, Ava DuVernay. They're super curious people.
mhm.
And it's why they make movies like 17-year-olds as well as people their actual chronological age.
Well, you look at what Guillermo del Toro has done. This is a man that I mean, he's a master of the craft. Yet he puts himself in situations to explore and do work that he has never done before. You know, he to do a film like Pinocchio is otherworldly. It's one of the most technically advanced styles of filmmaking that have ever existed. And he's not a filmmaker that necessarily had to do that. He's done some of the best work in the last 25 years, yet he put himself there because he was curious to. He wanted to learn about that style of filmmaking. And that for me was it just kind of highlighted what us as storytellers should embrace, and that is the unknown. That level of taking yourself out of your comfort zone should be exciting. Shouldn't be daunting, should be exciting. And you should dive into it head first. And just because you don't have all the answers in the beginning doesn't mean you'll accumulate it along the way, but then you have to take that first step. You know, if I made the same film over and over and over again because I knew or I know how to make that type of movie, then what am I actually saying at that point? Not just as a storyteller, but what am I saying about myself? And filmmaking in any, and again, like in any position, it is an extension of yourself to a certain extent. I find it to be very personal. So I love the challenge of putting myself in situations or in areas of filmmaking that I'm not entirely aware of or comfortable in, because it just means that I have to go out and learn it, and that is exciting within itself. And then you have something else in your, you know, tool or your bag of tricks that when you progress your career and you progress and you mature and you kind of mature yourself into the filmmaker that you're eventually going to become. But the only way to do that is to go out and acquire the knowledge. It's not going to be given to you. You have to go find it.
And when you have to go find it, just like Del Toro learning animation, something he had
Mm-hmm.
not done before, it
Mm-hmm.
requires you got to put in the hours, right? It takes a level
Mm-hmm.
of discipline. What kind of
Mm-hmm.
mentoring around discipline would you give people?
One thing I've realized, and I can only speak for myself as a writer and a director, is that I am the only one who could hold myself accountable. You know, I'm not an employee at a company that I know that there are certain deadlines that I have to hit or there's certain things that I have to accomplish. If I'm writing a script, no one's necessarily begging to read my script. I have to put in the work to deliver the script. And that requires discipline. You have to be your own boss and your own employee so you can hold yourself accountable. And I'm a big believer of putting in, you know, I think I forgot who coined it, that, you know, you have to put in your 10,000 hours to really understand the craft that you're a part of. And that involves saying yes and, you know, being on the field, acquiring knowledge, reading books, working. I mean, you have to put in the hours. It's not just going to come to you through osmosis. It's not going to be gifted to you. You have to put in the work. And when it comes to the discipline, it's so easy to get distracted. It's so easy to, you know, look at your phone. I mean, especially today. Like, in fact, when I write, I turn off, well, my phone's not even in the office, but I turn off, you know, access to the internet. I turn off any possible distraction I could have so I could put in the necessary hours so I know that the next day I have, you know, I can keep moving the story forward. But that requires self-discipline because I have no one around me to say, hey, you have to write today. Or, hey, did you do your shot list? Or, hey, did you, you know, go in the editing room? No one's really pressuring you to do that. You have to kind of put that on yourself. And I think that's almost kind of that's the hardest thing. When you have no outside factor serving as a motivational tool, how can you motivate yourself to do it? And that's, I think, where discipline can kind of take over. You know, there are days where I wake up and the last thing I want to do is sit down and write. You know, but that's one day less, you know, if I don't sit down and write, I wasted a day not writing, thinking about the fact that, oh, I don't have to write today. You got to kind of give yourself that absolute, no, I have to. It's work. It's my job. Like any other job in the world, I have to wake up, put my clothes on, get in front of it, and get to work. And I think if you attach that kind of fundamental discipline, you know, 9 to 5, whatever it is, you sit down and you work. All the writers or filmmakers that I've admired or the books that I've read about storytellers that I look up to treat it like a job, because that's what it is. But even these elements, when it's just you and your computer, you and your typewriter, you and your editing suite, it's the same principles. And You have to find that kind of voice in yourself to serve as that motivating factor. But no one, I rarely have outside people that motivate me. And I had to learn very young that the only motivation I really need is myself. And that requires a lot of reflection and a lot of exploration. And that side is like, what do I need to do that? And that is like a massive, especially for the writers, especially for the aspiring writers and aspiring writer directors. You wake up, get your cup of coffee or your tea, you go downstairs and you get to work and you put in the necessary hours, get your pages done, and then the next day you treat it. You look at the Stephen Kings of the world, the Aaron Sorkins of the world, even the Tarantinos of the world. It's their job and they treat it as such.
It sounds like the hack that I use for myself, which is don't put it on your list, put it in your calendar,
A
and
hundred percent.
actually just
A
say, okay,
hun-
I'm returning phone calls from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. I am writing from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. I'm doing
Exactly right.
email from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. And you stick to it in the calendar, because if it's not in the calendar, you haven't really
Doesn't
committed to set the
well, not
time to.
only and not only that, and I think this goes for any like because I think filmmaking you can tie it to entrepreneurship, you can tie it to small business. When you're starting any business, particularly any small business, you know a lot of it is sweat equity, especially in the beginning. No one's paying you. My first screenplays, no one paid me to write them. I had to create the product and then introduce it to the marketplace to see if there was a buyer, but I had to write it first. So when you don't have those outside kind of motivational tools, you have to find, again, going back, find it within yourself and then add them to what you said and then make it real. And like putting it on, I have my calendar and I have the hours I write, like you said, Adam, the writers, the time I have emails, the time I look at my phone, like my calendar is like 100 different colors and it's blocked out the entire day, because if it isn't, then the day you'll lose yourself in the distractions of everyday life, right? So I think especially if you're starting your career and you know that and the people around you might not understand why you're putting in 8 hours a day when no one's paying you necessarily for those pages that you're writing. You got to see the long-term vision behind what you're doing. So I always find that correlation between filmmaking and like starting a small business or entrepreneurship to be kind of incredibly similar. You got to put in the work in the beginning, you got to put in the hours and the sweat equity, and if you do it consistently with integrity, putting all your creativity into what you're doing, it's going to pay out.
I love that. And mentoring tip for everybody: color coded calendars.
I am color core. I mean, I color everything's, and emails is like blue. A film script is red. A television script is yellow. Like editing is blue. Like everything is a different color.
Fabulous. Okay, now you are smiling now. You were not
Yeah.
smiling a minute ago when you were talking about the discipline and the sweat
Yeah.
and the heart. Okay, but now
Yeah.
let's talk about a last mentoring tip about, can we have fun when we do this?
I think, and this was very true to me in the beginning of my career. I was obsessed with the destination of where I wanted my career to be or what I wanted my career to be. And I was obsessed with that sort of end goal. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have a goal, but I took it a step too far where that's all I thought about. And I viewed the journey of going to that goal as almost like it was a process I definitely didn't enjoy. I felt it as a necessary evil that I had to go through to get to there. And then what I found was that I wasn't happy on a day in and day out basis because I was obsessed with the goal and I wasn't reveling in the journey itself. And I was very lucky to find mentors in my life that I was able to communicate, Adam, you being one of them, where I was giving very sound advice about the necessity to enjoy the journey no matter how difficult it might look like that day. Because those are all going to accumulate into experiences that are going to make you better for it. And that took a lot of self-reflection and a lot of humility to just kind of let go a little bit and enjoy the journey regardless of where the destination ends up. And if you end up where you originally thought, that's fantastic. But if you enjoy the journey, if you really take it in a day at a time, enjoy the work, the good days and the bad, regardless of where you end up, it's going to be a fulfilled life. I really believe that. And of course, in the beginning, if somebody told me that, I would say, shut up. But now that I'm a little older, have considerably less hair on my head due to that stress in my early 20s, I've now come to the realization that I wish I would have enjoyed it more, because then when that happens, the joy of it all never is enough. The highs will never be high enough, and then the lows are going to be this vast void that you'll never climb out of. Like, you take it in and day out, good and bad. You take it with the same sort of weight and you find the enjoyment out of it. I promise you guys that by the end of it, you're going to look back at the totality of your experiences with great love and reverence for, as opposed to, oh, I had to do that so I could, collect my Oscar or whatever. Like, that shouldn't be the motivation for anything, is the end game. You should enjoy the process. And we don't
Also
talk
because,
about that enough.
yeah, also because the end game is something that we don't really control.
It's
We
not in
control
our hands.
ourselves. We
It's
control the
not in our
process.
hands.
We don't
It's not
control if people download our movies, if they double click, if they
nothing.
stop after 15 minutes, if we get a nomination, if we don't get a nomination, if we win, if we lose. We do not control those things. Just like if you're opening a movie and you don't control if there's a blizzard in the Northeast and the cinemas are closed, you cannot control that. Uh, and you're saying enjoy the ride. And you talked a little bit about your younger self. You're already a younger self. But imagining when you were even younger, I see the number 23 over your head. If you scroll back to when you were 23, um,
Uh-huh.
and you could talk
Uh-huh.
to yourself right now, split
Uh-huh.
screen, instead of me split screen, it's you 23-year-old split screen. What would you tell that younger Fernando?
You know, it's you gotta put I would tell myself that you have to put one foot in front of the other. Um, I was so driven by being a director, a studio director, a notable writer director, recreate the 90s cinema with Tarantino and Richard Linklater. I was so obsessed with that I was open to any shortcuts to get me there. And I realized that every time I thought I was going to skip 6 steps to get closer to my goal, it actually took me back 3. There are no shortcuts in this. And that's not a bad thing. You can't treat it like this sprint that you got to get to. I was a guy, because I saw the documentary or I read about Steven Spielberg and then he made Jaws when he was 27. I was like, I got to make my first movie at 27. So you're doing anything and everything to get by 27, make your movie. And you're willing to, again, take as many shortcuts, meet with as many people, like, oh, I can get you this opportunity. And in reality, it got me nowhere. And it wasn't until I was like, all right, let me actually just start the baby steps, one step in front of the other. Let me start at the bottom and see what happens. And that's when things actually started happening for me. That's when my career actually started moving forward. That's when I started, instead of trying to leap, I started walking. And then when I stopped treating my career as a sprint, but more as a marathon, and stopped, more importantly, stopped comparing myself to my contemporaries, then that's when I found not just joy in what I do, but peace. And I think a lot of my 20s was riddled with anxiety about accomplishing certain tasks and doing whatever I had to get to those tasks. And it wasn't until I shifted that mentality that my career actually started. I really believe that.
Fernando, thank you so much. I would say that many of your contemporaries would be very happy to have the career that you have made for yourself. And we are so happy that you have taken the time to give us some accelerated training and mentoring ideas here on this breakthrough. Thank you so much for joining us.
It was such a pleasure to be here and joined with you. What you guys are doing, and for everyone listening, I just there's going to be good days and bad days. And my last takeaway is that on the bad days, know that there's good ahead. And on the good days, take them in and maximize it. But it's the journey, guys. It's the ride. Enjoy the ride.